Tomorrow, the atmosphere changes, not all at once, not with noise, not with spectacle. It begins the way the most important shifts always begin, quietly, beneath the surface, in the places most people are too distracted to notice. But make no mistake, a window is opening, and what moves through it carries weight. Above us, the moon is entering a tense and consequential conversation with two immense forces, Neptune and Saturn. One governs fog, longing, symbols, seduction, the spell of what we want to believe. The other governs law, consequence, structure, and the cold architecture of what is. When these currents tighten around the moon, the emotional field becomes unstable. Perception deepens, but certainty weakens. Intuition sharpens, but so does distortion. This is the kind of day that can pull the veil thinner than usual. You may feel it before you understand it. A heaviness in the chest, a strange stillness in the mind, a sense that something in your life is no longer willing to remain hidden. Thoughts may drift. Emotions may intensify. What once felt settled may begin to tremble under a new light. You may find yourself revisiting a memory, questioning a bond, sensing that a truth you avoided is now moving closer. That is not random. That is not your imagination running wild. That is pressure in the psychic weather. The moon rules the inner tide, your instincts, your emotional reflexes, the private language of memory, the body's unspoken intelligence. Neptune dissolves edges. It blurs lines, heightens sensitivity, and fills the atmosphere with dream, projection, yearning, and spiritual static. Saturn does the opposite. Saturn compresses. It clarifies. It demands maturity. It asks one question, again and again. What is real enough to endure? And tomorrow, those forces do not blend. They collide. This is not soft energy. This is friction with purpose. A square in astrology is pressure that refuses denial. It exposes fault lines. It reveals where fantasy has replaced discernment, where emotion has replaced truth, where hope has drifted too far from reality. Under a sky like this, revelations do not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes they come as a sentence you cannot stop thinking about, a dream that won't leave you, a sudden detachment from something you thought you still wanted, a quiet knowing that the story is changing. That is why this moment matters. In this briefing, we're going into the deeper meaning of this alignment, what it activates psychologically, what it opens spiritually, and why so many people may feel pulled into reflection, emotional reckoning, and sharpened intuition at the same time. We'll talk about the signs that illusion is breaking, the signals your inner world may be sending, and how to move through this energy without losing your footing. Because this is not just a mood, it is a threshold. And if you've been feeling something shifting lately emotionally, intuitively, spiritually, you need to pay attention now. Stay with me. Like the video. Subscribe if you track these cosmic shifts with intention. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what has already begun to stir in you. March 17th is not just another date. It is a test of perception, a confrontation with truth, and for some, it may be the moment the illusion finally breaks. To understand why the alignment building around March 17th, 2026 carries such force, you have to begin with the moon, not as ornament, not as background, not as a pretty light hanging above the city after dark. You have to understand the moon as a living instrument in the astrological field, a moving chamber of memory, instinct, reaction, hunger, tenderness, and emotional truth. The moon is the place in the chart where life becomes personal. It is where the world stops being theory and starts becoming feeling. It governs what you do before you explain yourself, what you sense before you can prove it, what your body remembers long after your mind has tried to move on. This is why lunar transits matter so much. The moon moves fast, faster than the heavier planets, faster than the long arcs of destiny that unfold over years. It changes signs roughly every 2.5 days, and because of that, it does not simply mark time, it modulates atmosphere. It adjusts the emotional pressure in the room. It changes the charge in the air. It shifts the internal weather. while other planets build the architecture of a season. The moon tells you what it feels like to stand inside that season at 2 a.m. Alone with your thoughts, hearing something in yourself you can no longer ignore. That is its power. The moon is the first responder of the chart. It reacts, it absorbs, it translates. It takes the abstract language of planetary force and turns it into sensation, into mood, into longing, into unease, into tenderness, into a sudden heaviness you can't quite name. This is why people often feel lunar aspects immediately. You do not have to study astrology to know when the moon is speaking loudly. The signal arrives in the nervous system first, in the chest, in the gut, in the dream state, in the strange, private moments when a memory rises without permission and sits in front of you like it has come to collect something. The moon governs the subconscious, and that alone makes it formidable. Most of what drives a life is not fully conscious. Most reactions are older than the moment that triggers them. Beneath every decision sits a pattern. Beneath every pattern sits an imprint. The moon holds those imprints. It rules the deep interior, the emotional wiring formed by memory, care, loss, safety, fear, attachment, and repetition. When the moon is activated, those hidden structures do not stay hidden for long. Feelings surface, old material stirs. The psyche begins sending signals from rooms you thought were locked. This is why lunar energy can feel so immediate, and at times, so destabilizing. You may become more reflective without knowing why, more nostalgic, more watchful, more sensitive to tone, silence, distance, subtext. You may feel emotionally full before anything obvious has happened. That does not mean you are imagining it. It means something internal is being touched. The moon does not always announce itself with drama. Sometimes it enters like fog. Sometimes it arrives like a pull backward through time. Sometimes it reveals itself through a single thought that lands harder than it should and refuses to leave. But the moon is not only emotional, it is intuitive. It rules the quiet intelligence beneath language, the instinct that registers truth before logic catches up. The moon knows by resonance, by texture, by the feeling of something being off, by the sudden certainty that a space, a person, a pattern, a decision is carrying more than it appears to carry. When lunar energy intensifies, intuition often gets louder. Empathy becomes sharper. You pick up more. You read more between the lines. You notice currents that others miss because they are still waiting for evidence, while your inner world has already sounded the alarm. That heightened receptivity is a gift. It is also a responsibility. Because the moon does not only mirror your private life, it also reflects the collective field. In astrology, the moon is often understood as a bridge between individual emotion and the wider psychic climate. It registers what is moving through groups, through families, through societies, through the collective body. During certain alignments, many people can feel variations of the same theme at once: restlessness, grief, introspection, volatility, tenderness, psychic fatigue, the need to reconsider what they have accepted for too long. The moon is not separate from the crowd, but it is not swallowed by it either. It is the translator between the sky above and the interior life below. That is why it matters so much when the moon comes under pressure. When the moon forms supportive aspects, the emotional field can become coherent. There may be softness, steadiness, insight, relief. But when the moon is pulled into more difficult geometry, especially squares, the atmosphere changes, tension enters, contradictions sharpen. Emotional material that might otherwise remain dormant is forced upward. Under a square, you can feel the split between what you want and what you know, between comfort and truth, between the story you've been living inside and the signal now trying to break through it. A square does not let the psyche sleepwalk. It creates friction for a reason. It draws attention to what is unresolved, distorted, neglected, or ripening toward revelation. And when that pressure falls on the moon, the first place you feel it is within. In your reactions, in your emotional thresholds, in your dreams, in your capacity or inability to keep pretending something does not matter. This is where the current window becomes significant. Because when the moon enters contact with forces as powerful as Neptune and Saturn, its signals intensify. The emotional body becomes more porous, more alert, more burdened with meaning. Sensitivity rises, symbolism thickens, inner conflict becomes harder to avoid. The moon starts carrying messages not just about mood, but about truth. Truth hidden in memory, truth buried under defense, truth waiting beneath the surface tension of everyday life. And once the moon begins transmitting at that level, you are no longer dealing with an ordinary day. You are standing inside an opening, a threshold in emotional time, and what moves through it has the power to change what you feel, what you see, and what you can no longer afford to misunderstand. Now we move deeper into the field past the moon, past the immediate tide of emotion, into the planet that governs what cannot be held in clean edges. Neptune. If the moon is the chamber of feeling, Neptune is the mist that enters that chamber and changes the shape of everything inside it. It is not a loud force. It does not announce itself the way Mars does, or organize itself the way Saturn does. Neptune arrives differently. It works through atmosphere, through impression, through longing, through the part of the psyche that does not speak in bullet points or hard conclusions. It speaks in symbols, in dreams, in ache, in beauty, in the strange, unsettling pull towards something you cannot fully name but cannot stop sensing. This is why Neptune has always been one of the most difficult planets to describe and one of the most consequential to ignore. Neptune rules what lives beyond the reach of ordinary logic, not because logic is useless, but because logic is limited. There are dimensions of human experience that refuse to flatten themselves into explanation. Grief does not move logically. Desire does not move logically. Spiritual hunger does not move logically. Art, devotion, sacrifice, transcendence, fantasy, surrender, these belong to Neptune's terrain. Neptune governs the invisible currents under the visible world, the emotional and psychic weather beneath the structure of daily life. It presides over what is felt before it is understood, imagined before it is built, intuited before it is proven, and that makes it powerful. Neptune opens the threshold between worlds, between the material and the symbolic, between fact and meaning, between what happened and what it came to represent in the soul. Under Neptune, the world becomes less fixed. Boundaries soften, categories blur, definitions lose their rigidity. You begin to realize that some of what you call reality has always been shaped by memory, desire, projection, and fear. Neptune does not create that truth. It reveals it. This is why Neptune is so often associated with illusion. But illusion is not always a lie in the cheap or obvious sense. Neptune's illusions are usually more intimate than that, more sophisticated, more dangerous precisely because they are emotionally convincing. They are the stories we cast over people when we need them to be different than they are. The meanings we assign to timing, silence, chemistry, loss, destiny. The hopes we pour into situations that have not earned them. The fears we drape over uncertainty until uncertainty starts looking like fate. Neptune rules the projections that make life feel enchanted, tragic, sacred, cursed, cinematic, chosen, or doomed. And sometimes, those projections are beautiful. Neptune is the source of awe. It governs the exquisite ache in music, the image that breaks you open, the poem that tells the truth sideways, the moment in a dream that feels more real than the day you wake into. It rules compassion, spiritual sensitivity, artistic vision, reverence, and the longing to dissolve the hard edges of the self and merge with something larger. Under Neptune, people often feel more porous to beauty, more tender towards suffering, more receptive to mystery. They become more aware that life is not merely transactional, not merely strategic, not merely practical. There is something else moving here, something symbolic, sacred, unfinished, impossible to measure. That is Neptune at its highest expression. But every doorway has a shadow, because the same force that heightens spiritual sensitivity can also distort perception. The same openness that allows grace to enter can also allow confusion to take root. Neptune can turn discernment soft. It can flood the emotional field with ambiguity. It can make the boundary between intuition and projection almost impossible to read in real time. Under strong Neptune conditions, what is true and what is wished for can start wearing the same face. That is when the fog rolls in. Situations that once felt easy to interpret may suddenly become slippery. Your assumptions weaken. Your certainty dissolves. You replay words, glances, patterns, trying to decode what is actually there and what you may have layered onto it. One moment you feel you know exactly what is happening. The next moment everything goes diffuse. Neptune does not always attack clarity head-on. Sometimes it seduces clarity away. It replaces clean perception with atmosphere. And atmosphere can be persuasive, especially when the heart wants an answer the facts have not yet given. This is one of Neptune's signatures: strong feeling, weak edges, and yet Neptune is not here merely to confuse you. That is the mistake people make when they reduce this planet to fantasy or deception. Neptune has a deeper assignment. It reveals the emotional and spiritual narratives that are already shaping your reality from behind the scenes. It shows you where you are idealizing, where you are escaping, where you are romanticizing pain, where you are mistaking longing for truth, where you are chasing transcendence because ordinary reality has become too sharp to bear. Neptune surfaces the dream beneath the decision, the grief beneath the attachment, the hope beneath the denial. That is sacred information if you are brave enough to receive it. Neptune is also deeply tied to intuition, and this is where the territory becomes even more complex. Because Neptune does not only blur, it also sensitizes. It heightens receptivity. It thins the psychic membrane. It sharpens your response to subtlety, symbolism, emotional undercurrents, and the unseen. During strong Neptune periods, people often report vivid dreams, uncanny coincidences, creative surges, heightened empathy, and the unmistakable sense that something is speaking to them from just beyond the surface of ordinary consciousness. This is why Neptune has often been understood as a keeper of the veil. The veil is not fantasy. It is the threshold between visible form and invisible influence, between the world you can verify and the world you can only feel. When Neptune is activated, that veil grows thinner. The symbolic world presses closer. The subconscious becomes louder. Images carry more charge. Dreams become more populated. Emotional impressions arrive with unusual force. You pick up things you cannot neatly explain. You sense shifts before events confirm them. The soul becomes more fluent in a language the rational mind does not fully trust. But the thinner the veil, the greater the vulnerability. Because when boundaries dissolve, discernment must become stronger, not weaker. Neptune can make people more susceptible to misreading motives, idealizing others, spiritualizing dysfunction, or confusing emotional intensity with truth. It can make you see what you need to see instead of what is actually there. It can make a hope feel prophetic and a fear feel factual. It can turn ambiguity into obsession. This is not failure. It is exposure. Neptune reveals how much of perception is shaped by inner content, and that matters now, especially now. Because around March 17th, 2026, Neptune forms a hard square to the moon. That contact changes the emotional atmosphere immediately. The moon, which already governs instinct, memory, and internal response, now moves under Neptune's pressure. The result is not simple sensitivity. It is magnified perception without guaranteed clarity. You may feel more. You may sense more. You may dream more. But you may not immediately understand what any of it means. The emotional field deepens, but its outlines become more mysterious. This is where people begin to feel the signal, an uneasy knowing, a pull toward reflection, a strange ache around something unfinished, a person, a memory, a choice, a pattern that suddenly feels charged with meaning. Intuition may spike, but so may confusion. You may feel that something is shifting behind the visible scene. And you would be right. Neptune's square to the moon often works like submerged pressure. It draws hidden emotion upward. It amplifies the stories you have been living inside. It makes the inner cinema harder to ignore. But that pressure serves a purpose. Neptune brings illusion to the surface so it can be seen, not destroyed blindly. Seen, examined, named. It reveals the myths you have been telling yourself about love, destiny, rescue, identity, worth, disappointment, spiritual purpose, and emotional truth. It asks whether what you are clinging to is revelation or projection, whether what you call intuition is clear perception or longing wrapped in mysticism, whether the beauty you feel is pointing toward truth or helping you avoid it. And this is where the briefing turns, because Neptune can soften the world, but it cannot anchor it. Neptune can open the dream, but it cannot test the structure. Neptune can thin the veil, but it cannot tell you what will survive on the other side of it. For that, another force is already approaching, a colder one, a stricter one, a force that does not ask what feels transcendent, but what stands, what lasts, what is real when the fog burns off. Where Neptune dissolves, another power defines. Where Neptune enchants, another power measures. Where Neptune opens the dream, another power comes to judge its foundations. After Neptune, the atmosphere hardens. The dream gives way to stone. The fog meets architecture. The part of the sky that whispers now stands before us in full weight and says, "Enough." This is where Saturn enters the briefing. If Neptune is the dissolving tide, Saturn is the wall that remains when the tide pulls back. If Neptune opens the inner sea, Saturn marks the shoreline. It is not interested in fantasy for its own sake. It is not seduced by mood, by projection, by longing dressed up as revelation. Saturn is the planetary force that asks what can hold, what can endure, what can be built without collapsing under pressure. In astrology, Saturn is often called the teacher. But that word is too gentle unless you understand what kind of teacher this is. Saturn does not flatter. Saturn does not rush to comfort. Saturn instructs through consequence, through repetition, through endurance, through the uncompromising intelligence of time. This is the planet of structure, of accountability, of law, in its deepest spiritual and material sense. Saturn governs the framework of reality, the visible and invisible systems that determine what lasts and what fails. It rules discipline, restraint, commitment, integrity, effort, maturity, and the slow, often unglamorous work of becoming someone your soul can actually stand inside. While other planets may inspire movement, emotion, ambition, or desire, Saturn asks a more severe question. What are you made of when the pressure stays on? That is why Saturn matters. Its movement is slow, deliberate, and heavy with consequence. Unlike the Moon, which changes the emotional weather within days, or Neptune, which saturates the field with dream and ambiguity, Saturn works across longer spans. It governs developmental time. Its influence is rarely about a passing mood. It is about the seasons of effort that shape a life, the responsibilities accepted, the truths avoided, the limits tested, the pattern repeated until it is finally understood. Saturn's lessons do not vanish because you look away. And when Saturn becomes active, what has been postponed begins asking to be answered. This is why Saturn is often linked to karma, not in the cheap sense of reward and punishment, but in the more exact sense of consequence, cause and structure, choice and result, what you build, and what that building eventually costs, what you avoid, and what avoidance turns into over time. Saturn reveals that a life is not created through intention alone. It is shaped by repetition, by boundaries, by standards, by what you practice when no one is watching, by what you agree to carry and what you finally refuse to carry any longer. Saturn does not negotiate with illusion. It does not reward shortcuts, self-deception, magical thinking, or emotional improvisation masquerading as wisdom. It asks for sobriety. It asks for patience. It asks for contact with reality so direct that it can feel like exposure. And yet, this is exactly why Saturn is sacred. Because beneath its severity is a fierce devotion to truth. Not abstract truth, not decorative truth, but functional truth. What works, what is stable, what can bear weight, what remains true when desire is removed from the equation. When Saturn is emphasized in an alignment, clarity often arrives with pressure. A person begins to see what is sustainable and what is not, what is mature and what is performative, what is devotion and what is dependency, what is discipline and what is fear. Wearing a respectable face, Saturn has a way of stripping emotional narratives down to their load-bearing beams. It shows you where your foundations are sound and where they were built on hope, denial, avoidance, or borrowed certainty. This is where Saturn stands in direct contrast to Neptune. Neptune dissolves edges. Saturn defines them. Neptune opens the dream. Saturn audits it. Neptune speaks in atmosphere and symbol. Saturn speaks in consequence and form. Neptune may ask what is possible in the realm of longing, compassion, and vision. Saturn asks a harder question. Can it survive contact with reality? Can it withstand time, pressure, responsibility, fatigue, loss, repetition, and truth? These two planets are not enemies, but they do not operate on the same frequency. One expands the imaginative and spiritual field. The other tests whether what emerges from that field has bones. And around March 17th, 2026, Saturn is not standing at a distance. It is pressing directly into the emotional field through a square to the moon. That matters immediately, because when the moon, the seat of instinct, memory, vulnerability, and emotional reflex comes under Saturn's pressure, feelings stop floating and start carrying weight. Emotional reactions that were easy to dismiss may suddenly feel unavoidable. What you have minimized may begin to register as serious. What you told yourself was temporary may reveal itself as structural. In a Moon-Saturn square, the psyche is asked to grow up in real time, not by abandoning emotion, but by becoming accountable to it. This can feel heavy. There may be a sense of emotional compression, seriousness, fatigue, distance, or restraint. You may feel less interested in dramatizing your feelings and more compelled to examine them. There can be a heightened awareness of where your boundaries are weak, where your habits are costly, where your emotional life has become entangled with patterns that cannot follow you forward. Saturn does not encourage impulsive reaction. It slows the system down. It makes you pause. It asks what this feeling means over the long term. It asks what this attachment is teaching you. It asks whether your current choices are building the life you claim to want. And this is where the alignment becomes especially charged. Because Saturn is not acting alone. At the same time that Neptune is softening edges, amplifying dream, and pulling hidden emotional material toward the surface, Saturn is applying pressure in the opposite direction. One force says, surrender to the signal. The other says, test the signal. One says, feel more. The other says, verify. One dissolves certainty. The other demands a more durable kind of certainty be built from what remains. This is the real drama of the moment. Not fantasy versus reality in a shallow sense, but something far more consequential. The confrontation between what you have felt, what you have imagined, what you have projected, and what can actually endure. Neptune may make a person see through hope. Saturn asks whether hope has evidence. Neptune may deepen compassion, spiritual perception, and symbolic meaning. Saturn asks whether that meaning is changing your life in a grounded, measurable way. Neptune may pull you toward longing. Saturn asks whether longing is leading you into truth or simply keeping you bound to a story that can no longer hold. This tension does not exist to punish the dream. It exists to refine it. Saturn is not the enemy of vision. Saturn is what gives vision form. It is what takes inspiration out of fantasy and forces it into architecture. It asks what must be committed to, what must be released, what must be strengthened, what must be faced without self-pity, and what must be built slowly if it is ever going to last. In that sense, Saturn is not denying the soul. It is training it. It is demanding that emotional insight become mature action, that intuition become discernment, that desire become responsibility, that revelation become a life you can inhabit without collapsing back into confusion. So when Saturn presses on the moon in this March 17th field, do not mistake the weight for failure. The heaviness is diagnostic. The pause is diagnostic. The seriousness is diagnostic. Something is being measured. Something is being tested for integrity. Something in the emotional body is being brought into direct contact with reality so that a deeper truth can emerge. And because Neptune is also involved, that truth may not arrive cleanly at first. It may come through disillusionment, through detachment, through a sudden awareness that what once felt emotionally convincing is no longer enough. But Saturn's gift is that once the illusion weakens, something stronger can finally be built. That is the opening now. A narrow, consequential window in which feeling, fantasy, and fact are forced into the same room. And in that room, Saturn does what it always does. It asks what remains when the story falls away. It asks what is solid enough to survive the truth. It asks who you become when emotion is no longer allowed to hide from structure. Because this is not just an emotional transit. It is an inspection, a reckoning, a chance to stop living by what feels persuasive and start living by what is strong enough to endure. Now we come to the point of impact. We have traced the moon through the chambers of emotion. We have entered Neptune's fog, where longing, vision, and illusion move through the same bloodstream. We have stood before Saturn, where reality hardens, where structure speaks, where consequence strips away whatever cannot hold. But none of this reaches its full force until we understand the mechanism that binds them in this moment. The square. This is not a decorative angle in astrology. It is not background texture. It is not passive energy drifting through the sky. A square is pressure with intent. It is one of the most consequential forms of planetary contact because it does not allow distance and it does not permit sleep. When two celestial bodies meet at roughly 90 degrees, they do not blend. They resist. They interrupt. They force a reckoning. Each planet pushes its agenda, and neither one gives way without consequence. That friction becomes heat. That heat becomes movement, and that movement becomes transformation. This is why the square matters so much. In softer alignments, energy can pass between planets with grace. There is cooperation. There is flow. There is a sense that things are working with you. But the square does something else entirely. It exposes strain. It reveals where the current design can no longer continue unchanged. It brings you to the threshold where adjustment is no longer optional. Something must be confronted. Something must be corrected. Something must be seen more honestly than before. The square is the moment the universe stops hinting. It is the knock at the locked door. It is the crack in the wall that tells you pressure has been building behind it for longer than you realized. That is why squares are so often associated with turning points. They are not always dramatic on the surface, but they are decisive beneath it. A square creates conditions in which the old arrangement becomes unstable. What was hidden starts surfacing. What was tolerated starts becoming costly. What was numbed starts demanding language. And what was once emotionally convenient may suddenly become spiritually unbearable. This is not punishment, it is activation. The square forces consciousness to move where inertia would have preferred to remain. Without this kind of tension, many people would keep circling the same patterns, indefinitely believing the same story, repeating the same attachment, avoiding the same truth, postponing the same decision. The square breaks that loop. It introduces enough pressure that the psyche can no longer remain neutral. Something in you has to respond. Something in you has to wake up. And when the moon is involved, that awakening is rarely abstract. It becomes emotional first, immediate, bodily, personal, because the moon rules the inner field: memory, sensitivity, instinct, reaction, attachment, the nervous system's private weather. Any square to the moon tends to register in the soul before it is fully understood by the mind. You feel the tension before you can name it. You notice a shift in your emotional atmosphere, a restlessness, a heaviness, a sudden tenderness where there was numbness, a surge of reflection, a return of old material, a subtle but undeniable sense that something in your internal world is being pressed on from multiple directions at once. That is exactly what this alignment does, because this is not a simple square involving one planet and one message. This is a more layered formation, a more charged geometry. The moon is not merely under one kind of pressure. It is receiving incompatible demands from two very different powers, Neptune and Saturn. One opens the field through dream, symbol, intuition, and emotional permeability. The other narrows the field through structure, realism, boundaries, and consequence. The moon sits between them like a living instrument, translating both frequencies at once. That is why this window can feel so psychologically complex. Part of you may want to trust the feeling, to follow the intuition, to lean into the invisible signal and let the emotional tide carry meaning where logic cannot. Another part of you may become wary, disciplined, cautious, wanting proof, definition, containment, something solid enough to hold in the hand. One force says, listen to what the soul is sensing. The other says, test what the soul is sensing against what reality can actually bear. The square sharpens that contradiction until it becomes impossible to ignore. This is the internal crossroads, not because one side is holy and the other is false, but because both are demanding authority at the same time. Neptune says the unseen matters. Saturn says the durable matters. The moon says you will feel the conflict in real time. And that is where transformation begins. A square aspect does not create tension for the sake of tension. It creates tension because tension reveals where integration is required. It shows you the fault line between two truths that have not yet learned how to live together inside you. In this case, the fault line runs between imagination and structure, intuition and discernment, longing and reality, surrender and responsibility, emotional meaning and practical truth. The square does not let you choose one side and bypass the other without consequence. It insists that you become more conscious than that. That insistence can feel uncomfortable. You may find yourself revisiting a relationship, but this time, unable to hide from what you already know. You may sense something meaningful in a dream, a coincidence, a subtle shift in tone, but also feel the pressure to slow down, question your interpretation, and separate signal from projection. You may realize that what once felt emotionally compelling no longer feels stable, or that what once felt cold and restrictive may actually be the structure you need to protect your future. The square brings these realizations not as theory, but as inner confrontation. And this is why squares so often function as spiritual training grounds. They make you stronger by making you more honest. They refine perception by putting it under pressure. They expose emotional habits by denying those habits their usual camouflage. They force evolution by removing the comfort of unconscious repetition. The square does not ask whether you would prefer an easier route. It asks whether you are ready to stop outsourcing your growth to time and circumstance. It asks whether you are willing to examine what has gone unchallenged in your inner life. It asks whether confusion is actually confusion, or whether it is the moment before a truth becomes too visible to deny. This is where insight begins to gather, because another function of the square is revelation. Under pressure, The psyche starts producing answers it could not access while comfortable. Contradictions sharpen into understanding. Background questions come forward. Peripheral discomfort turns central. What seemed vague begins taking shape. The mind sees the pattern. The body confirms it. The emotional field rearranges around it. And suddenly, what was once hidden is no longer hidden in the same way. Sometimes this arrives as a dramatic realization. More often, it arrives quietly. A sentence lands differently. A silence says more than words. A memory returns with new meaning. A desire loses its glamour. A truth you were not ready to hold last month becomes undeniable now. That is the gift inside the square. Not ease, not escape, not immediate resolution. Clarity under pressure. And because this particular square works through the moon, the clarity can feel deeply personal. It may touch your emotional patterns, your relationships, your spiritual beliefs, your private grief, your longings, your sense of direction, your threshold for illusion, your tolerance for what is unsustainable. The square has a way of making the hidden architecture of your inner life briefly visible. What you do with that visibility matters. That is why this moment requires restraint as much as awareness. The square is not an invitation to react impulsively to every emotional surge. It is an invitation to observe with seriousness, to witness the pressure without immediately discharging it, to let the internal dialogue reveal itself, to watch where Neptune floods the field with feeling, where Saturn hardens the field with judgment, and where the moon tries to translate both into something livable. The goal is not panic. The goal is precision. Because contrary to what people assume, the square is not chaotic energy. It is corrective energy. It is a sacred disturbance. It is the cosmos applying pressure exactly where pressure is needed in order to interrupt drift, illusion, avoidance, and emotional sleep. So yes, this alignment can feel tense. It can feel complicated. It can feel like multiple truths are colliding inside one emotional body. But that tension is not meaningless. It is productive. It is directional. It is one of the most potent engines of awakening astrology can offer. It pushes you forward by refusing to let you remain split in the same old way. And in this March 17th window, that pressure becomes especially powerful because the moon is carrying both Neptune's dream current and Saturn's reality force at once. It is receiving atmosphere from one side and judgment from the other, vision from one side and structure from the other. It is being asked to feel deeply without drowning and to face reality without shutting down. That is not light work, that is soul work. This is why the day may feel charged, even if nothing dramatic appears to happen on the surface. The real event is occurring within the field of perception, within the emotional body, within the stories breaking down and the truths trying to rise through them. The square is the hinge, the point of compression, the angle through which illusion, feeling, and fact are forced into confrontation until something clearer can emerge. And once that process begins, you are no longer standing in ordinary time. You are standing inside a live threshold, one that can expose, refine, and transform whatever in you is finally ready to stop living in fragments and start living in truth. When an alignment carries real force, the first place it announces itself is not in the outer world, but in the interior one. It arrives through mood, through memory, through the sudden shifting of your private atmosphere. Before events make sense, the body often knows. Before the mind can explain, the emotional field has already changed. That is how this kind of transit works. It enters through the moon, and right now, the moon is under pressure from two radically different forces. Neptune opens the floodgates of feeling, intuition, symbolism, and emotional permeability. Saturn answers with weight, sobriety, realism, and the demand to see clearly. One deepens the dream, the other tests it. One softens the edges of perception. The other asks whether what you are sensing can survive contact with truth. Between them, the psyche becomes intensely alert. This is why so many people experience this kind of alignment first as emotional confusion. What felt simple may no longer feel simple. A conversation returns to your mind with a different tone. A memory you thought was finished starts pulsing again. You may find yourself replaying someone's words, questioning your reading of a situation, wondering whether you missed something essential. That does not automatically mean disaster. It means perception is being reworked. Neptune clouds the lens, Saturn adjusts it. The tension between those two movements can make the inner world feel temporarily unstable. But instability is not always a problem. Sometimes it is the beginning of truth. Under this sky, buried emotions can rise fast. Feelings muted by routine may come forward without warning. Old attachments, disappointments, or turning points may return to consciousness with unusual force. You may feel more reflective than usual, more inward, more occupied by larger questions. Where am I going? What am I still carrying? What in me is real? And what has been sustained by habit, fear, or imagination? Saturn sharpens those questions. It pushes the mind toward honesty, maturity, and long-range perspective. At the same time, Neptune heightens sensitivity. Empathy can increase. Imagination can intensify. You may feel more open to beauty, more porous to other people's moods, more psychically aware of undercurrents that do not show up in plain speech. Dreams may become louder. Sleep may bring symbols, messages, fragments, unfinished emotional material. The subconscious starts speaking in images because the waking mind has not yet caught up. And yet this is where discernment becomes essential. Not every feeling is a fact. Not every intuitive flash is the whole truth. Not every emotional wave deserves immediate action. This alignment asks for observation before reaction. It asks you to let the waters settle enough to see what is actually there. So, the psychological effect of this transit is not chaos, it is sorting. Emotional sorting, spiritual sorting, perceptual sorting. What rises now is asking to be recognized, not obeyed blindly. Confusion may be the first layer, but it is not the final one. If you stay present, if you resist the urge to dramatize or escape, something deeper begins to emerge. A clearer inner map, a more honest emotional truth, and the quiet but irreversible realization that something in you is no longer willing to remain unconscious. One of the most consequential features of the March 17, 2026 alignment is this. It can bring hidden truth into view, not all at once, not with spectacle. More often, it happens the way real revelation happens quietly, internally, with the sudden sense that something you could not name before is now impossible to ignore. When the moon's emotional intelligence moves through Neptune's fog and Saturn's hard light, illusion begins to lose its protection. What was blurred starts taking shape. What was disguised as hope, fantasy, or emotional habit may begin to show its real outline. This is how truth often arrives under a sky like this. A shift in perspective, a sentence that lands differently, a memory that returns carrying new meaning. A relationship you once romanticized may suddenly look more exact, more exposed, more honest than before. Something you were clinging to may no longer feel sacred, only familiar. And that change, however subtle, matters. Because when attachment weakens, clarity enters. For some, this will feel like waking from a dream you did not realize you were inside. Patterns become visible. Repetition becomes undeniable. You begin to see where you have mistaken longing for alignment or confusion for depth. Saturn does not do this to punish. It does it to stabilize. It clears the emotional smoke so you can build on what is real. And truth may not arrive only through logic. It may come through intuition, through a dream, through a coincidence, too precise to dismiss. Through the quiet but unmistakable feeling that something in your life is shifting beneath the surface. Pay attention, but do not rush. Neptune still moves through symbols, and symbols require reflection. This is not a moment for impulsive conclusions. It is a moment for patient recognition, because what is being revealed now is not merely information. It is orientation. and if you stay still long enough to see it clearly, it may change the direction of everything that follows. Now, the question is not what this alignment means. The question is how you move through it without losing yourself inside it. Because this is a live window, a charged one. The moon is amplifying feeling, Neptune is distorting edges, and Saturn is demanding truth. If you meet this current unconsciously, it can pull you into confusion. If you meet it with discipline, it can become revelation. So begin with grounding. Slow the system down, breathe deeper than the emotion. Step away from noise. Walk. Sit in silence. Put your body back in the present moment before your mind turns sensation into story. Write down what you feel before it hardens into assumption. Naming an emotion can keep it from ruling you. Then practice restraint. Do not treat every wave as instruction. Do not answer every feeling with action. This energy requires observation before reaction. When something rises, fear, longing, clarity, grief, pause long enough to ask, is this truth, projection, memory, or signal? Saturn rewards the pause. That pause may save you from building a decision on unstable ground. Listen closely to dreams, symbols, and subtle intuitions, but verify them. Neptune speaks in impressions, not contracts. The message may be real, but it may not be complete. Let insight mature before you act on it. Let patterns repeat before you name them fate. Look honestly at your relationships, your attachments, your expectations. Ask what is actually nourishing you and what you've kept alive through fantasy, habit, or fear. Release what no longer holds truth, not dramatically, cleanly, and give this energy somewhere sacred to go. Create, pray, journal, make meaning without forcing certainty. Above all, balance intuition with reality. Let the soul speak, but let structure answer. By the end of the day, return to the page. Record what shifted, what surfaced, what clarified. Because this alignment is not only testing your emotions, it is teaching you how to trust yourself without abandoning discernment. As this briefing closes, understand what this day truly is: a threshold. March 17th, 2026 is not ordinary sky. It is a charged passage where the moon stirs the emotional body, Neptune deepens the field with dream, symbol, and distortion, and Saturn enters with the hard demand for truth. Together, they create a rare atmosphere, one in which feeling intensifies, illusion weakens, and whatever has been hidden beneath the surface begins to press upward. Some of you have already felt it. A shift in mood you couldn't explain. A sudden change in how you see a person. A memory, a desire, a dream that lingered after waking. A quiet but unmistakable sense that something in your life is being exposed to a harsher, cleaner light. Do not dismiss that. These are not random fluctuations. They are signals. They are the inner evidence that a deeper sorting is underway. And that is the real purpose of this alignment. Not fear, not confusion for its own sake. Awakening. This square asks you to stop romanticizing what is unstable. Stop clinging to what no longer carries truth, and stop mistaking emotional intensity for clarity. Neptune may open the inner vision, but Saturn demands that vision be tested. The moon carries both forces through your emotional world, so you can finally see what is real enough to keep. Move carefully now. Journal. Reflect. Create. Watch your dreams. But do not rush to conclusions. Let insight mature. Let the fog clear on its own timeline. What feels uncertain at first may become the very truth that reorders your path. If this message found you at the right moment, stay with this work. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and share below what this alignment is bringing to the surface for you emotionally, intuitively, spiritually, because this is not just a transit. It is an opening, and if you meet it with courage, it may show you exactly what must end, what must remain, and who you are becoming beneath the illusion.